All right, let's start with some big inputs that are coming in from West Asia, because what is quite clearly going to be a shift in U.S. policy. The United States has now announced that it will have no more role to play in the Turkish operations against the Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria. Now, over a phone call with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly discussed Turkey's plans to establish what Turkey claims will be a safe zone east of the Euphrates River in Syria. Now, the announcement comes after Erdogan had said that a military incursion, this is Turkey crossing over into northeastern Syria to put down the Kurdish rebels, and this is something that Erdogan is saying is pretty imminent. The Turkish president has also expressed his frustration with the failure of the U.S. military and the security officials to implement the agreement between the two nations. Erdogan has also reiterated the necessity of the safe zone to eliminate the threats from the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia. The statement from the White House said that Turkey will now be responsible for all ISIS fighters in the area captured over the past 2 years. Now, interestingly, the two NATO allies had agreed in the month of August to establish a safe zone in northeast Syria along the border with Turkey. Now, Ankara has said that the zone should be cleared of the Kurdish YPG. Remember, the YPG is in fact an organization with which the Americans had allied and had aided them with active air support in their campaign against the ISIS. Now, Turkey has said that it wants to settle almost about 2 million Syrian refugees in the zone. Turkey currently hosts 3.6 million Syrians sheltered from Syria's more than 8-year-long conflict, which began way back in the year 2011. Now, Turkey has said that the United States, which supports the Syrian Democratic Forces, is moving way too slowly to set up the zone. It has repeatedly warned of launching an offensive on its own into northeast Syria, where the U.S. forces are stationed alongside the SDF. Recently, the ties between the allies have been under pressure over Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 defense missile systems and the trial of the local U.S. consulate employees in Turkey. All right, now for more on this, we're joined in by our West Asia Bureau Chief, Daniel Pagani, who's joining us live from Oman. Good morning to you, Daniel. Now, this is a very interesting announcement that's come in from the White House, where they're saying that they will have no more role to play in northeastern Syria, and that means that they would let Turkey do pretty much what it wants with the group that the United States had earlier allied with in its fight against the ISIS and also in its fight against the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria.
Absolutely, yes. I would say that this was an expected move. The Kurds for many months have stated that this was Turkey's plan. They want to create, so to say, a safe space along the northern border of Syria. Turkey wants to create a safe space. The American president called directly the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They discussed the matter, and Trump personally guaranteed that American troops will play absolutely no role in this. So this leaves, so to say, the Kurds betrayed. If you have a look at the social media coming out of northern Syria, many of the Kurds, many of the Kurdish fighters, but also many among the Kurdish population of the area feel betrayed by the United States of America. They are questioning Washington's behavior. They are asking why, despite having been the staunchest and most solid and most reliable ally on the ground in the fight against Islamic State, Washington is withdrawing. But Donald Trump has shown once again that geopolitics and his very own interest comes first. He does not want to ruin the relation with Turkey, which is the second NATO largest member. And as you have correctly pointed out, tensions between Ankara and Washington have raised quite considerably of late.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, the question that I want to ask you is, try help us understand in this very complex geopolitics that is unfolding in northeastern Syria, why is the United States relenting to this demand of Recep Tayyip Erdogan? Because the United States also has its own interest to fulfill in northeastern Syria.
Absolutely, yes. The problem is that, as you correctly pointed out, relations between Ankara and Washington have not gone down well lately. The S-400 is just one of the many examples. But Turkey has requested to the United States multiple times in the last 3 years to withdraw from northern Syria. Ankara considers the Kurdish forces there linked to Kurdish terrorist organization or fighting an insurgency in the southeastern part of Turkey since 4 decades. So they see this northern part of Syria, Turkey sees this northern part of Syria as a threat. They say that terrorists there can organize and maybe launch attacks against Turkey. So this was a bone of contention between Washington and Ankara, but now President Donald Trump does not want an enemy in Turkey. He needs Turkey. He does not want Turkey to shift its alliances and get even closer to Russia, and perhaps, who knows, one day even closer to Iran, which is Washington's arsenal. Hence, Donald Trump decided to let Turkey get into northern Syria, saying that his troops will remain neutral. So these will settle at least one of the bones of contention between the two major NATO allies.
Absolutely, indeed. There are said to be almost about 1,000 troops on the ground in northeastern Syria, the U.S. troops there. But the question that I want to ask you is, if Turkey does intend to go ahead and carry out this operation, does it mean that they'll be crossing over the border into Syria? And does it also mean that this violates the Syrian sovereignty? And does it mean that Bashar al-Assad may be compelled to act in this case? What are we hearing from Damascus on these Turkish plans?
The answer to all your questions is yes. Yes, it means that Turkey will be violating once again, because it has already done, the Syrian sovereignty. They already have troops close to Afrin in the northwestern part of Syria, but they will put more troops on the ground, so this is a further violation. Secondly, they will also transfer 1 to 2 million Syrian refugees permanently in Turkey in this northern part of Syria, despite the fact that these refugees might not belong to the northern part of Syria, they come from somewhere else. What is President Bashar al-Assad saying about it? For now, he's waiting and watching how this operation will unfold, because it remains also to be seen how this will unfold. Crossing into northern Syria and taking control over a swathe of land which is more or less 30% of Syria is not going to be easy. So it also remains to be seen practically how Turkey intends to do that. Yes, it's a sovereignty violation of Syria, but it seems that no one is actually taking care about the territorial sovereignty of Syria anymore. Not the US, not Turkey, and not the many rebel armies funded by foreign countries, particularly Gulf countries currently fighting in Libya.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Dan Lipagani, for joining us and getting us all those updates. So this, of course, appears to be yet another beginning of a conflict that could go on for a fair bit of time, because Turkey has quite clearly made it abundantly clear that they would like to carry on with their operations in northeastern Syria, and the YPG, the Kurdish YPG militia that had been such a close ally of the United States. The United States has now said that they will have no longer any more role to play in northeastern Syria. We'll, of course, track the developments as they unfold in northeastern Syria. But for the time being, let's now shift our attention to what is happening in Iraq, where at least about 8 people, we're given to understand, have been killed in fresh clashes between the Iraqi security forces and the anti-government protesters. So the death toll has now gone up to almost about 100 in the last 6 days of unrest, with more than 6,000 people being injured. This even as the Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi has pledged reforms in a bid to pacify angry protesters. Now, the Iraqi government has also announced a series of reforms in an effort to restore peace. The announcements were made after a special overnight cabinet session that was called in the wake of the anti-government protests. Now, the cabinet has also issued a decree including about 17 planned reforms. And this covers areas such as land redistribution, increased welfare stipends for those in need. To address the rising unemployment, the government has also spoken about creating a large market complex and also increasing government benefits for those without jobs. Now, the government has also officially designated those killed in the protests as martyrs and has granted special benefits to their families. Now, the Iraqi Human Rights Commission has also put the death toll at about 99. Well, almost about 4,000 people are said to have been wounded since the protests kicked off last Tuesday. Meanwhile, the United Nations has also taken note of the situation and has condemned the violence. The United Nations Head of Assistance Mission for Iraq has called upon all parties to pause and reflect and to hold people accountable for the reported deaths.